Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.
Well, hello and welcome to Engage for Success Radio with me, Jo Moffat. Engage for Success is a not-for-profit movement and we are the UK's leading voice on the topic of employee engagement. We're raising awareness and running events through our area networks around the country, our topic and sector specific thought and action groups, developing research, publishing case studies and shining a light on great practice, particularly through these weekly radio shows. Our weekly radio shows are in fact now streaming live on YouTube. Simply search Engage for Success Radio podcast where you will find us. You can also visit us at engageforsuccess.org where you can learn more about the movement and sign up for our weekly newsletter. I am one of the 3 regular hosts for Engage for Success Radio. And as with everyone who supports and is involved in the Engage for Success movement, we're all volunteers and we all have day jobs. Mine was as founder of Woodreed, which I recently sold and which is now rebranded as 7Cs, the culture consultancy. So I'm delighted to still be involved and able to carry on working to help clients create great places to work. I get very excited and my passion is high performing cultures of engaged employees. So in other words, everything to do with employee engagement, employee experience, and of course, internal communication. So to today's show and to today's topic, we are on show number 622. In our Engage for Success radio shows. We're still calling them radio shows because we started before podcasts were a thing, really. But essentially, it's a podcast. And today's topic is looking at why big government projects fail and what leaders can do about it. And to help us explore this topic, I'm very pleased to welcome today's special guest, Matthew Oleniuk. Matthew is a public sector transformation advisor. He was a former senior executive in the public service. He spent over 15 years in providing oversight of high value government projects, reviewing billions in public spending. And he now advises leaders on leadership behaviour, oversight and project risk. Through his platform, The Risk Insider. He's also the creator of the free Project Health Check tool, which I'm going to be talking to him a little bit more about during the course of the show and hopefully find out how people can get hold of that. But the tool is basically to help teams catch trouble early and deliver what matters. So Matthew's specialism really is supporting governments and then applying transferring that experience to any leadership team, really. If you are launching a major program that promises transformation, why is it that too often these projects spiral out of control? Why is it that they often only deliver a fraction of what was promised, or perhaps worse, just fizzle entirely? So today we're going to be looking at the deeper causes behind public sector project failures. We're going to be looking at cultural resistance, poor oversight, political misalignment, and most importantly, we're going to be looking at how leadership behaviour and not just the tool or the framework is often the decisive factor in turning high-risk projects into successful ones. So no big billing to live up to there, Matthew.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much, Jo.
It's a pleasure to have you. Pleasure to have you, certainly. So tell us, before we get into the topic of why big government projects fail and obviously the sort of transferable insights that we can gain from that to all projects really in larger scale organizations. Can you just tell us a little bit about you and your background and how you came to be involved in this particular field?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the first, say, half of my career, I actually spent a number of different countries, mostly in project and client delivery.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was doing was I was always forward facing, both private and public sector, quite a mix,
Mm-hmm.
and always seeing the results being delivered as hopefully as intended, but very often there was a spanner thrown in the works, whether it's private or public. When I went back to Canada after a number of years, I found myself in Ottawa and working with the internal audit community in the Canadian federal government.
Mhm.
And at that time, I really had no idea what audit was. I had no idea what it meant beyond, double checking a few numbers on tax
Mm.
returns or something like that.
Yeah, we tend to
Uh,
think, don't we, of audit being financial audit, and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, just pull out that green visor and a sharpened pencil, and you're good to go. Uh, but as I was developing a lot of learning and communications projects for this community, it did start to interest me quite a bit. So jumped on the other side of the tracks, decided to take up audit for a little while, and ran with it for about 15 years or so.
Mhm.
And that led to yes, becoming chief audit executive and working on major transformational projects across the federal government. And one thing that really, I mean, it took a little while to be able to fully articulate this, but I found myself straddling two different perspectives and two different almost languages. The audit side was, of course, you have to think about risk, you have to document it, you have to regiment it, you have to systematize it, and
Mhm.
make it bigger, 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 bigger. And on the other side, the project delivery side, what I saw was, okay, we're going to fill out the risk forms, and then we're going to get on with the real work.
Mhm.
And you had these two extremes that you know tried to pretend that they understood each other, but at the essence, they really had different sets of priorities.
Mhm.
And so once I started to notice that, then I realized it is, it's more than a communication issue. It is an understanding issue. And what's at the heart of this? And as I'm sure we'll dig into, what we find is a dominating risk averse culture that ends up ironically adding more project risk to all of these activities, just by virtue of risk avoidance.
Okay, which is a bit counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so d- I want to ask you, just to answer the sort of the really big question about why do big projects fail. But before we do that, I wonder, have you got any kind of numbers? I think isn't there one of the big four consultancy firms band is a figure around as something like 70% of all um, change projects fail or something like that? Is that, have you
Yeah,
got a sense of this in terms of numbers, and what do we mean by failure as well?
yeah, we bandy about the 50% marker pretty often. Now, whether or not that's just kind of a convenient middle divider or not, um, I'm not really sure. And yes, you're right. It's not necessarily abject failure, as in trying to construct a tower and it collapses and burns to the ground, but rather. Did it go over budgets? Did it go over schedule, or did you have to, reduce what you originally wanted to deliver? So
Mm,
the term failure can be interpretive there,
mhm.
and frankly, that interpretation is what's pretty readily embraced in a lot of public facing projects when they don't live up to the standards and the expectations of the public.
Mm, mm. And is it kind of going slightly off tack here, but is it often
Yes,
that
go for it.
people oversell something I mean, whether that be to the public or whether it be internally within an organization, people talk things up, and they oversell them, they overproject the benefits, they raise people's expectations to a level that is unrealistic. I mean, is that part of the problem?
There is a little bit of that for sure. We can get into some very specific issues that pop up. When
Mm.
especially if we have a political leaning. A lot of these larger projects promise jobs, but of course we can't agree on what a job is, and that sounds a little bit silly. But is a job 15 hours part time? Is it 30 hours? Is it 35? Is it 40? These
Uh-huh.
questions have a big impact when
Yeah.
we're talking big projects in the economy, right? And when
Mm.
we have services and lots of intertwined industries all playing
Mm.
together. So things like that can be misconstrued, but often it is we've got something kind of under the surface which can sabotage what everyone thinks they understand as the expectation. And one is not properly articulating what the goals really are. I think that that's a huge issue, and I'd say that it's
Mm.
prevalent across the board, not just within the public sector.
Mhm.
Of everyone just kind of defines, we're going to, for example, uh, launch a new client user interface, a website or software, something like that.
Mhm.
Um, launching something is very different than launching something that works well, right? Uh, and
Indeed.
so
Yeah.
people expect that this is going to be better than the last one. And if it's only incrementally better, and we're still operating off of a 2005 vision, then people are invariably going to be disappointed,
Hmm.
even if technically they met the specs, technically they delivered something new. People want to be happy, and they
Mm.
want their lives to be made easier. So there is that kind of divergence a little bit, and it comes from a lack of truly fleshing out what the goals are, what the objectives are in a concrete sense, and then being able to, you know, uh, um, distribute and entrench that understanding. The
Right.
second thing that happens a little bit more below the surface is there's a very unfortunate practice that pretty much nobody really speaks about openly, but everyone kind of, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, discusses, and that's not to ask for the money that you need, but to ask for the money that you think will be approved.
Okay. Oh, now
And
that is a big one, isn't it? Let's be honest. And we
it's
can,
huge.
yeah, and we can see that in the public, well, private sector too, or in private companies too, can't we? And bidding for anything, and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we can, and a lot of the larger projects or larger companies in the private sector, if this does happen, and if there is a strong culture and one that doesn't tolerate that type of thing, it's, we're going to put our money where it's needed, not
Hmm.
not just to try to patch cracks in the road. But in the public sector, I do think that there is, uh, a very large um, sunk cost adoption.
Hmm.
And so we figure, well, we've already spent $100 million. We can't pull the plug now.
Mm.
So even though it was $120 million project, we're going to have to spend another 100 million because there's no going back. When in reality, there is going back, and that's the whole notion behind the true or the sunk cost fallacy.
Mm. Mm. Okay, interesting. Okay, so what, what, why do you think? And I guess, I mean, you've been doing this a very long time. You've been in this, you've been involved in an awful lot of large scale projects. So appreciating that circumstances vary and contexts are different, you will have along that way drawn some general conclusions around why things don't live up to expectations, or how we might define failure. Um, so let's begin then by first of all saying, how would you define failure, Matthew?
Well, I mean, we talk in projects about quality measurements, and it's at the end of the day, it's according to spec.
Right.
Did you identify what you wanted to deliver, and did you deliver it at cost and on time?
Hmm.
And so there's going to be wiggle room there. I mean, there is no project that is executed perfectly, and there is no activity that lands precisely on the budget that you outlined when you didn't even know what you were doing. You were just kind of sketching it out. So there are
Hmm.
going to be some variabilities there.
Hmm.
Um, but at the end of the day, like I said about that, that new client website or something. I mean, if it's landed or if it hasn't landed.
Hmm.
Um, but too often we set very broad aims.
Hmm.
We set up performance indicators that really measure activity rather than impact or value.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, we can point to how busy everyone was and how hard everyone
Hmm.
worked, but
Yeah.
not necessarily to what we actually wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
becomes the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. So why do big projects fail? And is it that we failed, that we've set the goals incorrectly and non-specifically, or that we haven't asked for as much money as we should do, or that we're measuring the wrong things? Or are there some true regular, we can point to reasons why, if we were being, if we're really being true to the word, falling short to a degree, why is it that that happens?
Well, I mean, yes to the first ones that you mentioned, but those are lower level more detailed reasons, I'd raise it up a few levels and really point to the infrastructure, how governments are set up to deliver,
Hmm.
and then the culture. And I'd say that those are, self-feeding kind of beasts in a way.
Hmm.
So if we start off with just infrastructure, how governments are set up,
Hmm.
we see that um, everything is built around protecting the public funds, the public purse, which is where it should be. I mean,
Hmm.
this is nobody's money; it's everybody's money at the same time,
Yeah.
and we want to make sure that that people aren't just tossing it around and looking at it for waste. But what we tend to do is apply more and more and more controls, more and more and more oversight, rather than making it more purposeful. So we have, the appropriations. I'm not going to go through it all, but I mean,
Mm. Mm.
appropriations process, which is all in Parliament, and it takes forever. And then, okay, the money's allocated, and then it has to be distributed to the ministries, and that has some oversight and some reporting, including, possibly an oversight committee reporting centrally, and then the actual ministry will have oversight committee and steering committee and everything else, and then maybe other ministries are involved, so we're going to have more oversight, overseeing the interplay between the ministries, and so on and so forth. So we just have layers upon layers upon layers upon layers.
Mm.
And
Mm.
this does a few things. One of which, quite obviously, I mean, anybody would see this most evidently, is that it slows everything down for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about trying to make things more agile, and that's the intention of virtually every project these days. Is maybe not
Hmm.
fully agile, but as close as we can make it. Both from a methodology perspective, but as well as just an agile mentality of being nimble.
Yeah.
Um, but when we have that type of structured oversight and delivery, it's just not possible to do that when you have so much gating from so many different players. You end up scheduling things for every 3 or 4 months, and that runs contrary to an agile mentality. So
Hmm.
that's a big one. The second kind of deeper one that's a lot harder to pinpoint is this notion of, with so many eyeballs looking at this, surely nothing can go wrong. Right? So if I'm starting to get a little bit uneasy about something, I'm wondering, is this going to become a problem? I'm not quite sure about this. Um, I can very easily convince myself that it has X number of oversight committees already. Y number of senior executives have signed off on this. There have been Z number of meetings throughout the year. So if there were a problem, surely someone else would have seen it and raised their voice by now. So it's probably going to be fine. And that's where this kind of, you get lost in the crowd, and we just assume that things are being taken care of. And senior leaders do the same as well,
Mm.
because of the fact that we just apply more and more and more oversight, more and
Mm.
more and more structure.
Hmm.
And that structure is what ends up throttling most of the projects in practice.
Right. Yes. Yes. I can see that. And would you say that, I know you are primarily a public sector guy, Matthew, but
Yeah,
um, you could see that. I can identify with that on a smaller scale in non-public sector organisations, in
absolutely.
businesses, um,
Absolutely.
just on a
I
different
mean,
scale.
I've worked in huge private sector companies as well, and
Mm.
it's not a matter of, I mean, this is kind of the misunderstood element here. It's not a private sector mentality and a public sector mentality. It's just an organizational one, and
Yeah. Yeah.
has bureaucracy taken over? Yes or no? But we see huge companies being overtaken by bureaucracy and operating as inefficiently or more inefficiently than any public sector organization. And we also see huge companies that are constantly ripping off the band-aid and trying to act like a startup.
Hmm.
So it really just comes down to the organizational culture, and
Hmm.
that's often what I try to impress upon the people that I work with is, um, at this late in the game, with organizations that have been around for over a century, and with mandates that will take them, well beyond that. You as a leader are likely not going to change that culture unless you're the CEO, or a CEO for many, many years. You're not going to change the culture of a 300,000 person organization by yourself. So what can you do is you can try to change the culture within your team. And recognize, if we are in a very risk averse, inefficient type of culture, that we're going to have to work with that, swim with the current, but build that productive, agile culture within our own control. And it definitely can be done. And there are a lot of triggers that we can lean on,
Okay.
to try to change that interplay.
Okay.
bec-
So I would like, sorry, I'd like, can we explore some of that then? Because I think
Absolutely.
um, it's that sort of replicable stuff, isn't it? And um, would be really fascinating to hear from you is, what are the ways in your experience that people can and have successfully changed the culture in their team? And then if you are able to point to any real world examples of that aren't contravening any sort of confidentialities or anything, that would be useful to hear. But I appreciate you might not be able to do the latter.
Well, I'll try for the latter, but for the former, um, yeah. So I mean, we somewhat accept, and again, to take your point there, let's avoid public sector and private sector. Just say, so risk averse cultures.
Mm,
um, it tends to be a top down energy, right? So we have the leadership and the oversight and the strategic direction kind of pushing down, and it's up to the individual teams or individual executive or leader, um, to kind of hold the line against that. So more, and not necessarily from a precision perspective, but just more risk aversion, more controls, more you know covering covering your rear to a certain extent.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
um, and that's the relationship that we often settle into, that we're kind of, you hear the term feeding the beast, right? We're going to
mm-hmm,
report tons, we're going to generate lots of stats, we're going to generate lots of dashboards, and we're going to just say yes, everything is fine, this is what we talked about last time, and here's where we are.
mm,
um, for a team that really wants to get ambitious and deliver things that perhaps the culture is not ready for, um, there is a way that we can start to approach that conversation. And that starts, first of all, just as I said, acknowledging we're not changing the culture. What we can change is our relationship with our immediate um, you know uh, body that we interact, or with the senior leaders that we have to interact with. And before we do that, we have to get to understand what it is that they're concerned about. So staying within the team, soliciting that ambition, doing kind of closed room, everything stays here within these four walls types of conversations. But what do we actually want to deliver, and what do we think the issues might be? And not the issues as in, well, this person will be tough to persuade, but rather what will be the sincere project problems that we could encounter. Um, Often when I work with people, I actively try to avoid the word risk, because that just invites this whole compliance activity, kind of rote
mm-hmm.
machinery type of thinking, that doesn't really serve anything. When what I prefer to talk about is, what are we trying to achieve? What's our goal in a concrete, tangible sense? And what would get in the way of us achieving that? That's what a risk is. It's just a
Yeah.
possible problem. So let's get rid of the language and let's talk about something meaningful.
Mm-hmm,
And so then having that exercise in a team that wants to achieve something, and what you quickly realize is that risk and ambition are not two opposing forces. Quite the opposite. Risk actually supports ambition, because what we're trying to do is identify where we want to go and flesh out a roadmap. Where are the potholes? Where are the ditches? Where are the gates? Where are all the issues that we could encounter along the way? And knowing that in advance helps us to prepare for it. It's not about let's shut it down because something might go wrong, but rather what could go wrong and how can we navigate that?
how can we
And
preempt it and be prepared
absolutely.
and head it off at the pass and all that kind of stuff? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And so what that means is a couple of different things. One is we might actually invite new avenues that we hadn't previously considered, because we realize that one particular path might be really, really more difficult than we'd like.
mm-hmm,
But more importantly, what it does is it builds our own argument. So we can try to preempt lots of objections before they're even raised, and that's what I like to say. Let's try to answer questions before they've been asked.
mm-hmm,
So if we really explore this from all angles and almost attack our own project,
Yeah.
to
Yes.
see what could go wrong, what could destroy our beautiful baby that we we brought into this world, and go to the senior committee armed with that, then it changes the conversation. Then we're
Mm-hmm.
saying, here's what we want to accomplish, and here's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the objections, and then we say, yes, we've identified this, and here's how we're going to counteract that. And then someone else might raise an objection, and same thing. Absolutely, that's a valid concern. And so as a result, we are going to do X, Y, and Z. And it becomes more of a proactive, a future management conversation rather than, what's going to get us in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to change everything right off the bat, but it changes the nature of the conversation, and it changes it that one time, and then the next time you build on it. And very quickly what we find is that we're changing not just the type of conversation but the nature of the relationship, and that starts to open people's eyes to what we can accomplish as opposed to what we need to avoid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a transparency and an honesty in sort of strength testing the concepts and the ideas and the plan and the project, whatever it might be, very early on to preempt and head off those problems.
Yeah, and transparency is a great word. Transparency of thought,
Mm,
transparency of method, transparency of dialogue,
mm,
because that's often what dooms a lot of initiatives. Is we become very protective. We become
mm-hmm.
protective of our ideas. We think it's a great idea, and it might be a great idea, but an idea is not the same as application. And
No.
so um, if there is a disconnect between those two, and I'm defensive and I'm protective and I don't want to hear it, then that lack of transparency and self honesty is going to doom the project. But once we open it up to people, handing around the baseball bat and letting them take a poke at it,
Mm,
then what we're doing is we're reinforcing the strength of the project and protecting the ambition that you know what. I love the title of this podcast, engage for success, um, because in my experience, most people actively want to be engaged, right?
yes.
Most people really, really want to deliver something big. They want to be excited about coming to work.
Mm,
They want to be proud of that thing that they've been working on for 18 months or whatever.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And when we get in this risk averse culture, that stifles it, and it just sows skepticism
mm,
and defeatism.
mm.
And if we can just try to protect that within our team, then even just within the team, it becomes contagious and it
Yeah.
amplifies and
So,
compounds, and we
s-
deliver so much more.
so what you're kind of talking about is we need to embrace potential risk, but don't use the word risk. We need to we need to actually at very, very early on, we need to take the blinkers off and look at all the possible downsides, all the possible things that could go wrong, as well as all the good, as well as some of the good things too, and
Yep.
try and make sure that we mitigate, minimize, address those things that could come and bite us on the backside.
Yeah.
And
Think
yeah.
think less about reinforcing the castle walls and think more
Mm,
about radar,
mm,
right? What's out there,
interesting.
what's coming, what's moving.
Yeah. And now I can't believe it. We've literally only got we've got less than 2 minutes left, Matthew. And we've just been talking about culture changing in your team and becoming, being transparent and preemptive approach and so on. Is there anything else that we really need to, from a leadership lesson perspective? What else is there? Anything else we need to say, or is that the really big one?
Well, everything does come from that,
Yeah.
and so yes, build that culture within, and then change the relationship with reporting upwards, and everything comes from there. Then the leaders start to think, what do I need to deliver this project, as opposed to,
Mm.
what does the machinery require of me?
Yes.
And then again, we're building on, and we're launching into ambitious objectives,
Mm.
and hopefully delivering something big for the people.
Mm, So yeah, okay, get that. Now, in the moments that we have remaining, I touched on this in my opening remarks about your project health check tool. How do people get hold of that if they want to find out more on what you've been talking about? Because I feel we've only just scratched the surface a little bit here, Matthew.
For sure. Well, you know what? The easiest way is go to projectredflags.com. And
Projectredflags.com. Okay.
yeah, And there you will find a handy guide on the biggest red flags that could sabotage your project, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
public or private.
Mm-hmm.
And a quick, easy read. And I promise you it will be impactful.
Excellent. Lovely. I shall do that myself. Thank you very much. Lovely.
Great.
Well, I'm afraid we've run right out of time. So all that really remains is to say a big thank you to you, Matthew Oleniuk, for joining us today and giving us a flavour of what it is about big projects that can cause them to fail, and some pretty solid cultural advice to try and stop that from happening. Thank you for listening to Engage for Success Radio. Don't forget you can download or stream any of the great shows from our archive at any time. Just visit engageforsuccess.org. And if you want to get involved in the movement, you can get in touch there too. That is us done for today. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Matthew Oleniuk, for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Goodbye.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.